So today we're going to finish up scaling on page 238, and it's talking about the scale used to make a model. So a scale model of a volcano, it was 5 centimeters, actually represented 250 meters. Then they gave the actual volcano, so these guys match right here, meters and meters. So it says how tall is the model. So you have to figure out the difference between these two. It says how are these equivalent ratios used to create a scale. So if I have 1325, I have to figure out I have to kind of basically divide it by 250. So those of us with calculators, if you take 1325 and divide it by 250, you're getting your scale. So the scale was 5.3. So if our scale is 5.3 and we have a 5 already, because there's 5 centimeters, 5 centimeters, we got 5 centimeters. We have to multiply it by our scale, which is 5.3. I'm going to rewrite it over here, 5.3 times 5. 26.5. Now there's two 26.5, so you have to make sure that you are reading it correctly. It's asking how tall is the model, so the smaller measurement, which is centimeters. So you've got centimeters here, and then you circle A here. Okay. Petra wants to represent a distance of 400 miles if the paper is 8.5 inches wide and 11 inches long. She wants to use this scale. If it's 1 inch, it's 20 miles. Okay. If 1 inch is 20 miles, see these inches, we're going to multiply them by 20. So 8.5 times 20 and 11 times 20. Going through, you're just doing your math. Got 220 here, and over here we got 170, got to put the decimal back in. So you got 170 by 220. So it says, can she make the scale drawing? So there's a 400-mile distance. So if you have 20 inches, it's not really going to fit on the paper because this is going to be more than what you need right now, because the 1 inch is 20 miles. This is a lot of inches. These are the inches that they're talking about. You would have to multiply these, and when you would multiply them, they would become so much more than 400 miles. So no, the distance would be longer than 8.5 by 11 inches. So it wouldn't fit on the paper. It would have to be smaller than, a lot smaller than this. So it would have to be something where if we can multiply, we would get less. So it has to be almost 100 times less. If you see this, like 17 times 22 would work, but not 170. So let's take a whole 10 off of it. So if we think 1 inch could be, which means this has to be a bigger scale because we have to fit more. So I'm going to double it. So 1 inch equals 40 miles would work because it's doubled. That means they can fit more in there. Okay. Science Museum has a scale model of a ladybug, and the model 50 centimeters is 9 millimeters. So 50 centimeters, 9 millimeters. Okay. 50 cm equals 9 mm. The length of the model is 1 meter. So this is where they're being tricky. They're throwing in a meter. So you have to know how many centimeters are in a meter. So 1 meter equals 100 centimeters. So basically, if instead of putting 1 meter here, I'm going to put 100 centimeters because they have to match. Okay, so basically, how do I get from 50 to 100? I multiply by 2. So how am I going to get what this equals? I'm going to multiply by 2. And it's still millimeters because we want to match. 9 times 2 is 18. Okay? So the actual ladybug is 18 millimeters. Okay, and that's 238. We're going to move from 238 to 241. Here's 241. And actually, you're talking about the volume of solids. So we're going through all of the different solids. We're talking about how can we multiply them to get a volume. Okay, so here's their example. They're growing the vegetables 6 by 2 by 3.5. There's a cube. Cubes in one of the bottom 3 layers is 6 times 2. So they're multiplying the bottom. Then they're doing the bottom 3. So 3 times 12. So took this, times it by 12. And then they took the half and multiplied that by 12. Okay, so they basically broke it up and multiplied it. And then they had to add all their answers together. Okay, it says, why do you multiply 12 by 3 to find the total number of cubes in the bottom 3? So these right here, why is it by 12? Well, there's 12 cubes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they said there's 2 layers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and behind it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 plus 6 is 12. So you have to multiply 12 by 3 because there are 3 layers, okay? 12 cubes in each layer, and there's 3 bottom layers because it asks about the bottom 3 layers, right? It's not asking about the top layer yet. 3 bottom layers. They're saving that half because they don't want it to be difficult for you, okay? Why do you multiply 6 times 2 by a half? So after you do the 3, why do you then multiply it by a half? Because the top layer, each cube in the top layer, this top layer right here, is 1 by 1 by a half, right? 1 by 1 by a half. Okay, so the top layer has, you know, it's still got the 6 feet by 2 feet by a half of a foot. Okay, so that's why we have to multiply it in that exact way right here for the top layer. Use the formula volume equals length times width times height to find the volume of this box, okay? So if they give us the volume, they want the length, 6, then they want the width, 2, then they want the height, 3.5. Some of you will do this like 3.5, that's totally fine. I'm going to do this where I can make this an improper fraction and multiply that way. So to make it improper, I'm going to do 3 times 2 and then add 1. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So it's going to be 7 halves. So we'll do 6 over 1 times 2 over 1 times 7 over 2 to make it just a little easier with the fraction. 6 times 2 is 12. Let's see what 12 times 7 is. 84. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. So we're going to have to cut 84 in half. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 2 goes into 4 2 times. I love when it's even like that. So the volume must be 42 cubic feet. Okay, it says, how does it compare to the volume above? The volume is the same. Okay, time to do the back. A regular box of pasta is 10 inches long. I'm already drawing it. You should always draw it. 8 inches wide. So 8 inches wide, that's how fat it is. 8 inches wide and 2.5 inches deep. So, ooh. So width becomes 8 inches wide and 2 1/4 inches deep. What is the volume of the box? Well, we just use our volume that we've always been using. So volume equals length times width times height. Okay, so that just means multiply, multiply, multiply. So I'm going to do the easy one first. 10 times 8 is 80. And then I know I'm going to have to multiply it by 2 1/4, which is this guy. So what I'm going to do is make it improper again. 4 times 2 plus 1, 8, 9, 9/4. Rewrite 80 times 9/4. Gotta do 8 times 9 equals 72. Add that 0 on the end. 1 times 4 is 4. Now we have to figure out what is 720 divided by 4. 4 goes into 7 one time. 4 goes into 32 8 times. And 4 goes into 0 0 times. So we got 180. The volume is 180, and they always use cubic, right? Cubic inches. You're multiplying it 3 times, so it's a cube. Cubic inches, 180 cubic inches, okay? Megan says that the formula base times height can be used to find the volume. Do you agree? Well, let's look. Length times width times height versus base times height. You have to think about, is base the same as length times width? Well, if we have a base times height, as long as the product is length times width, which is usually the base, that would work. So she would be correct. Yes, volume equals base times height is the same for a rectangular prism. Now we have to remember, it's only true for rectangular prism because length times height, or length times width, which is what we said before, equals the area of the base. Okay, so as long as it's a rectangular prism and it's only a rectangular prism, this works. Okay. Lau is thinking about buying a fish tank. Tank A has a base area of 530, which has the greater volume. How much greater? So if this one, tank A has the area, so they're giving us the length times, they're giving us this and saying we already know that this is 530 when you multiply them together. Okay. And which fish has a greater volume? So then we still have to multiply these guys. So now we know all 3 to multiply. This one's lucky, we only have to multiply 2. So we have to do 530 times 18.4. I'm going to bring out the calculator. 530 times 18.4 equaled 9,752. Then when I got over here, I had to do these. I have to do 22.5 times 26.2 times 16.6. Okay, 22.5 times 26.2 times 16.6 equaled 9,785.7. So we're looking at this and we're looking at this basically. 9,752 or 85. Which one is bigger and how much greater? Of course. So the volume of tank B is bigger, but I don't know by how much yet. I have to subtract to find out. So we'll say bigger by, then I will put my numbers over here to subtract them. 9752.0. 5 minus 2 is 3, minus 5 is 3, 0, 0. So we've got is bigger by 33.7 square centimeters. Okay. And they don't say, this one says square centimeters, but because we did all that work to multiply it 3 times, we want to make sure it says cube centimeters. All right, if you double the length, the width, and the height, how does the volume change? Okay, so if I were to multiply everything by 2, let's say volume equals 2 lengths times 2 widths times 2 heights. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, right? So everything's kind of being multiplied. The volume is going to be multiplied by 8. But we're talking about cubes this whole time. So it's going to be 8 times the original volume, okay? So the volume will be 8 times greater than the original. And then it says to give an example. So if I have the length is volume equals 2, and it's a rectangular prism, so I'm going to do 2 times 1 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 1. Okay, I'm just filling in for the length, width, and height over here. Okay, so we've got 2 times 4 times 2. And then 8 times 2, the volume equals 16, which is 8 times more than what I started out with, right, with my 2. Okay,